Upanishads are certain munis who are surviving on air. They clad brownish soiled garments and move around as per their fancy and have long locks of hair. They are the Keshins. They have capacity to be invisible, to illuminate the world with their luster and assist gods in their endeavors. This hymn indicates the seeds of yogic asceticism in the Vedas. The Upanishads epitomize philosophy espoused by the Vedas. They are also termed as Vedanta, which is the end of Vedas literally, but figuratively they are the zenith of the Vedas. The term Upanishad is derived from two prefixes, namely Upa plus Ni and the grammatical root Sada, which literally means sitting in proximity of someone. Upanishadic knowledge is secured by student at the end of his study. It is significant for the aspirant because, firstly, it leads to Atman, the inner self towards Brahman, which is itself devoid of duality and thereby brings about destruction of ignorance. Secondly, it destroys ignorance, which is the root cause of evil, and leads one to the knowledge that the Supreme Being, devoid of duality, is none other than one's own self. And thirdly, it destroys altogether all germs of outward activity by the way of cutting the root, that is ignorance. They discuss creation, sustenance, as well as dissolution of the universe, the nature of the soul and its relationship with the ultimate reality. They expound the nature of ultimate reality and the means to attain it. The roots of 6 systems of philosophy, which include yoga, are seen in the Upanishads. Etymologically, yoga has at its base the verbal root yuja, which means to connect, to attach, to yoke, or to harness. It is also understood as communion, which is of two kinds, unconscious and abstract, and conscious or concrete. It can be derived from the root yuja, to concentrate. Jacobson is of the opinion that yoga has 5 primary meanings. Firstly, disciplined method of attaining goal. Secondly, technique of controlling mind and body. Thirdly, a system of philosophy. Fourthly, techniques of yoga, namely Hatha Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, etc. And thirdly, a practice. The number of Upanishads varies from 10 to 108. The 10 or 13 primary Upanishads are regarded as the primary and earlier Upanishads. The remaining are later Upanishads. The paper is divided into 2 parts. Firstly, it is a reconstruction of the early philosophy of yoga through the 13 primary Upanishads. The philosophy of yoga is based on Sankhya philosophy. In the words of Chandradhar Sharma, yoga is intimately allied to Sankhya. The Gita calls them one. Yoga means spiritual action and Sankhya means knowledge. Sankhya is theory and yoga is practice. For all practical purposes, Sankhya and yoga may be treated as theoretically and practically sides of the same system. Yoga mostly accepts the metaphysics and epistemology of Sankhya. The salient principles like Mahat, Buddhi are discussed in the Kathopanishad. It says, beyond the senses are the objects of senses, and beyond the objects is the mind. Beyond the mind is the understanding, and beyond understanding is the great self. Beyond the great self is the unmanifest, and beyond the unmanifest is the Purusha. Beyond the Purusha there is nothing. That is the end of the journey. That is the final goal. Dr. Radhakrishnan has observed that there is subtle difference between Kathopanishad and Sankhya Yoga ideas of Buddhi and Mahat, whereas Sankhya Yoga identifies Buddhi and Mahat as different and the Upanishads distinguishes them. The Kathopanishad lays down that speech and mind shall be restrained in the intellect, that is Buddhi. The intellect is Mahat, which is distinguished from it, and Mahat is Avyakta. This indicates that the Upanishad has subtle differences between Sankhya Yoga system of philosophy and early Vedanta, which it adheres to. The Kathopanishad defines yoga as a steady control of the senses due to which the aspirant becomes completely focused. It is this situation that the self is stable and focused and the sense organs are firm under control. In this state, all desires are shed off and bonds are severed. This indicates a close proximity between the philosophy propounded by the Upanishads and the yoga. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad enumerates a list of techniques related to yoga in one full section. One should practice meditation by holding the three parts of the upper body erect and withdraw one's own mind and senses into the heart. This practice is essential for those who are desirous to cross over the ocean of births and deaths using the boat of Brahman. Thus, this yogic practice is regarded to be equivalent to Brahman, gives testimony to the fact that Upanishads and yoga are interrelated to each other. One should repress his breathings of his body and breathe through the nostrils and diminished breath and restrain his mind, just as wild horses are yoked to the chariot. The analogy of the chariot and wild horses seems to be an all-time favorite of the seers, as it is employed in the similar context in the Shukla Yajurveda, in the Kathopanishad, and now in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. The Upanishad advises about the ideal practice of ideal place for practicing yoga. The Maitri Upanishad mentions of techniques of yoga as Shadanga yoga. It includes pranayam, pratyahar, dhyan, dharana, tarka and samadhi. This is the Shadanga yoga propagated by the Upanishads like the Ashtanga yoga of the yoga school. This indicates pre-yoga philosophy and techniques even prior to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. By these techniques, an aspirant shakes off good and evil and makes everything into oneness in the supreme indestructible. In the enumeration of self-realization, the yoga philosophy gives importance to Omkar. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali states that Pranava, that is Omkar, is the indicator of the Supreme Lord. There should be the repetition of Om and reflection of what it stands for, that is the Supreme Being. The aspirant repeats the syllable Om and reflects upon what is signified by the syllable. His mind becomes one-pointed. Mundaka Upanishad propagates the chanting of Om. It says that the Pranava is the bow and one's self is the arrow and Brahman is the target. The arrow should hit the target without any mistake. The arrow should become one with the target. The Mandukya Upanishad discusses the nature of Atman and its correspondence with the three syllables of Omkar. The first stage of Atman is known as Jagrat, that is the waking state, which coincides with the A-matra of Om. The second state of Atman is Swapna, that is a dream state, which coincides with the U-matra of Om. The third stage is the Sushupti stage, which coincides with the Ma-matra of Om. The fourth, that is the Turiya stage, corresponds with the matra less Om. Thus, the all-pervading, omniscient Atman, encompassing the world and the individual stage, is classified into four stages of Om, the all-pervasive sound. This significance of Om, which coincides with the Supreme Lord, was well understood by Patanjali. Therefore, he says that Pranava is the indicator of the Supreme Lord. The Mandukya Upanishad has been elaborated and commented upon through a gloss called Mandukya Upanishad Karika by Gaudapadacharya, the grand preceptor of Shankaracharya. Through the verses, that is the Karikas, he has propounded a yoga named Asparsha Yoga, that is non-tactile yoga, a paradoxical term in itself, where yoga means to connect and asparsha means severing off the sensory connections. This yoga is achieved through training the mind to be mindless, that is attaining the stage of mindlessness called Amani Bhava, wherein the mind is trained to not fall prey to the functions of the sense organs. It is the superconscious experience of the Supreme without any interference of sense organs or sensory perceptions. The probable date of this Karika is 600 to 700 CE, which indicates that they are post-Yoga Sutras. It is obvious that Gaudapada combined the teachings of the Mandukya Upanishad and Yoga Sutras to develop his doctrine of Asparsha. It is evident that the Yoga philosophy had wielded influence over Gaudapada's theory of Asparsha Yoga and Amani Bhava. The Yoga Sutra 554 says that when senses are no longer in contact with their objects, they can resemble the inhibited mind. That is what constitutes pratyahara. This is the highest stage of subjugation. Now we will move to the last section of my paper, which is the influence of yoga philosophy on minor Upanishads. This part of the paper will discuss the impact of yoga philosophy on minor Upanishads. The later Upanishads have incorporated the principles of yoga philosophy. The list of 30 minor Upanishads, there are 9 Upanishads dedicated to yoga. This means it indicates that the sadhana of yoga found place in them. The Yoga Tattva Upanishad and the Yoga Raja Upanishad discuss about mantra yoga, laya yoga, hatha yoga and raja yoga. The mantra yoga consists of mantras and muttering of the name of God, that is japa. The meditation with the help of the name of God is sufficient to lead a man to final emancipation. The Yoga Raja Upanishad says that through the recitation of mantras with reference to Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, this yoga is successfully accomplished by scholars. The Yoga Tattva Upanishad gives a different dimension to japa. Chanting of mantras bestows some miraculous powers on the aspirant which are called siddhis. Such type of yoga is the lower type of yoga. The laya yoga. This is the dissolution of chitta. This is a type of hatha yoga in which creative and sustaining shakti of the whole body is actually and truly united with Lord's consciousness. The aspirant makes this shakti introduce him to her Lord, and enjoys the bliss and union through her. Through it, it is he who arouses her. It is she who imparts knowledge. The Yoga Raja Upanishad says that sage Krishna Dvaipayana practice this yoga. Due to Laya Yoga, one can attain comfort and bliss of one's own Atman. Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. These yogas are aimed at attaining supreme reality through control of senses. Hatha Yoga begins with the purification of the nervous system, that is Nadi Shuddhi, through practice of postures, bandhas and mudras. It is believed that the realization of the ultimate reality can be attained by arousing the serpentine power by means of control over breath. Raja Yoga deals with the process of controlling and calming the mind and attaining the state of samadhi. The means of attaining this is through the eightfold yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga. Some Upanishads follow this yoga, whereas others follow the sixfold yoga known as the Shadanga Yoga, excluding Yama and Niyama. The Tejo Bindu Upanishad mentions 15-fold yoga. They are Yama, Niyama, Tyaga, Mauna, Desha, Kala, Asana, Mulabandha, Deha Samya, Druksthiti, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dhyan, Dharana and Samadhi. Thus, there is an interrelationship between Upanishads and yoga. There's an interrelationship between Upanishads and yoga for their goal is the same, that is attainment of the supreme reality. Yoga, which flourished later than the Upanishads, that is the primary Upanishads, has delved upon and developed through the philosophy and method propounded by the Upanishads. The idea of liberation, utterance of Omkar, contemplation of Brahman, controlling the mind, the sense organs and the sensory perceptions, detachment, renunciation, concept of the cycle of birth and death, self-realization are common concepts dealt by both the Upanishads and the Yoga Sutra. This indicates that there were concepts floating freely at the time of the composition of Upanishads, which were later collected, arranged, and presented coherently in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The influx, wide acceptance of Yoga Sutras in the ancient and medieval period was so powerful that the later Upanishads borrowed, developed and applied many concepts of Yoga Sutras in their teachings. Thus, in the earlier Upanishads, we can see a gradual unfoldment of Yoga philosophy, and in the later Upanishads, we come across heavy borrowings from the Yoga philosophy. Though the teachings of the earlier Upanishads is for attaining supreme reality and their philosophy is predominantly Advaita, the base of Yoga philosophy is Sankhya. Yoga philosophy adds Ishvara to it and becomes Seshvara Sankhya, the means to achieve the goal through attaining of one's mind in one and the same. The sectarian Upanishads could not stay indifferent to the means propounded by yoga and rearranged and modified the yogic principles suitable to their task. Thus, yoga philosophy becomes central to both the earlier and the later Upanishads. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Madhavi. Are there questions?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's a beautiful paper.
Thank you, sir.
Very well read. See, on one side you have Upanishads.
Yeah.
On the other side you have Patanjali.
Yeah.
There are two more very major texts which would have given you greater image and greater presentation. One is Yoga Vasistha.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Brihad Yoga Vasistha you have, Laghu Yoga Vasistha you have, you
Yeah.
have Sapta Bhumika in it, Saptapada
Yes.
Yoga you have in it. And a reference to Yoga Vasistha would have added charm to this wonderful presentation
Yes,
too.
sir.
And all the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita also are not touched in your
Yeah.
paper. That would have added more glamour to
Yes,
it
yes.
deeply.
Yeah.
And the question now here is, in the morning papers, there was a reference to Turiyatita.
Huh.
In your presentation of a Pranava,
Huh.
you have only 4 parts,
Yeah.
and the last 2 is Turiya.
Yeah.
The question here is, in Upanishads, I think you have read them all, is there anywhere a reference to Turiyatita?
The Mandukya Upanishad speaks about the Turiya Avastha.
Turiya is Turiyatita.
Turiyatita, I did not come across that.
Where does that word come? Morning in one of the papers, there was a reference to Turiyatita.
Yeah.
There is a conflict among the thinkers that there is no state called Turiyatita.
Okay.
There is only one state, and that is Turiya, the 4th
yeah.
one. And
Yeah.
beyond that, there is nothing.
Yeah.
Some people are of that school. This is you have read so deeply. I just wanted to have a clarification whether there is any reference to Turiyatita state in the Upanishadic lore.
No, Turiyatita I have not come across, not in that sense.
At what point of time this Turiyatita word has crept into yoga philosophy? As a researcher, I am
Yeah.
asking. Somehow it has crept into the literature of yoga philosophy that there is a state called Turiyatita. Who, when, where has introduced this particular Turiyatita? As a point of
No,
clarification,
I
I
keep
would
it in
like.
this mind and arrange the
Okay,
paper
thank
in
you.
that particular manner. Yeah.
So now all these texts are available in digital form. It's getting easier to search for these kinds of questions.
Yeah.
One can
Yeah.
find the occurrence of the word.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Ladies and gentlemen, first, let me thank Government of India for initiating this grand dialogue with the entire world on a very pertinent point, that is communion of the object with the subject in terms of ultimate reality. Say it yoga, say it haqiqat mutlaqa in terms of Islam. This communion, this dialogue has entered into a new phase in modern era, though this has its own legacy. And I'm here to share with the learned audience with some glaring aspects of this past dialogue in respect to Muslim history and Muslim theology in relation to yoga. To sum up this dialogue, what I have found as a student of theology and history, Muslim history, and a humble student of Indian philosophy, some glaring results that actually bridges the gap between what is usually conceived as two adversaries in the due course of history. That is Abrahamic faith, represented in Islam, in the monotheistic approach to faith and practice, and another, the Vedic approach, that is the polytheistic. A big question has been creating troubles for the theologians, for the lawmakers, for the philosophers, in so many past phases of history, and sometimes leading to bloody wars, because they were unable to bridge the gap between monotheism and polytheism, even while talking in terms of religion, faith, and practices. Now, the big help was extended by a quarter of Muslim visionary seers known as Sufis, who had assimilated some glaring aspects of yoga into spiritualistic practices adopted by Muslim theology, Sufi systems, reflected in a number of orders which are known as silsila or salasil, that is plural of salasil, that is Chishtiya, Qadariya, Suharwardiya, Naqshbandiya, Sabiriya, Nizamiya, Malamatiya, Qalandariya, etc. They had absorbed basic elements of yoga, sometimes even the terminologies, the Bhut Shuddhi practices, the Yama Niyama, the Pratyahara especially, Pratyahara, which have been termed in Persian as Pase Anfas or Habsadam. So this actually opens to us a beautiful vista of or confluence of Abrahamic facets, monotheistic facets with the yoga or aspects of yoga. Well, I need not deliberate on something that is very well known to the learned audience about yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. It has been represented by different diagrams, and we have so many books and literature on this aspect. This Ashtanga Yoga, especially in regard to Hatha Yoga, have so many practices, so many postures are over there. What I have found is that at least 3 or 4 major postures have been adopted by the Muslim yogis or Muslim Sufis, like Siddhasana and so many others. Muslim yogis or Sufis, some of them, have also absorbed the chakra system and developed a system of their own, incorporating so many aspects from Indian yoga, turning it a new system, synchronizing system, or eclectic system, call it eclectic system, known as Latifa system or Lataif system. This slide actually goes with us into a past phase of history. What was the beginning of this dialogue? The beginning of this dialogue dates back to 14th or 15th century CE. And the area is Transoxiana or the Central Asia. We know that before the advent of Islam, this area where we do find in modern times Afghanistan, Iran, etc., and other states of Central Asia, was home to Buddhism. And there has been a direct dialogue between Buddhism and Islam from this plain and traversing after that to the mainland Arabia. We know as the students of history that the Buddhist Burmakites of Balakh, who are known as the Brahmaka, the Burmakite Chamberlain, Jafar Burmaki, Khalid Burmaki, etc., they were basically the Indian Buddhists. And they had their own now viharas in Balakh, in Bakhtria. And we had the largest statue of Gautam Buddha over there, which was demolished by certain quarters, as it is well known. And it is a sad development in recent times. In the Gandhara region, that is Bamiyan, there is sort of link of this dialogue between Indian legacy and the Arabic wisdom reflected in spirituality, or what is known as Tasawwuf or Sufism in Islam. That is the picture of the episode, sad episode after the demolition. Now, when we're talking about yoga in Sufism, there are so many aspects to deliberate upon. Of course, I won't be able to read out the paper. Rather, I'll be just having some presentations related to these slides. There are so many things over there. If it is yoga, if it is union, then if you are talking about salat, the basic prayer in Islam, that is as-salat, which is usually translated as namaz in Persian and Urdu or Hindi languages. The meaning here is union, and salat is also union. That is wasala yasilu salatan, if we elaborate it in terms of philologically. Bhutashiddhi, it is taharat, tazkiyah, and tasfiyah. Purification of the souls. Because in salat or in the prayer in Islam, as in the yoga, the biggest challenge is how to pacify, how to this is oscillating, or the oscillations of the body, or sensory oscillations, how to arrive at the state of calmness. So it is via bhut shuddhi, and this bhut shuddhi is perceived as taharat and tazkiyah in Islam. The asanas are the muraqabat, and in the Sufi literature we do have whole chapters on muraqabat. It's all about muraqabah. And if you just look into different asanas which are found in Sufism, it is Padmasan, it is Shavasnan, it is Shirasnan, it is Kapalabhati, Hridayanjali Mudra, Mool Bandha. All the three bandhas are over there. Mool Bandha and Udayanjali Mudra, etc. All the things are found in the Sufism. Yoga in Sufism, pranayama is pasanfas, pratyahara is hapsedam, chakra is lataif, asampragnanta savandhi is fana fil fana, ekya is tawheed, and aham brahmasmi at-tat and tatvam asi is anal haqq. And it is well known that is when Mansur al-Hallaj said anal haqq. Likewise, when Sarmad, the famous Sufi of India during Aurangzeb's times, he said, Umris ke afsane Mansur ko han shud man asre nau jalwa deham daru rasindra. It was nothing but aham brahmasmi and tatvam asi of Indian philosophy. Why is this? Because as a student of Muslim theology, any person can verify that these terminologies have no place in the canonical literature. But in the Sufi literature of the Naqshbandiya order, the Chishtiya order, and and some of the other orders, especially the Malamatis and others, they do have these terms. And these terms have come up via a number of translations which were made of Sanskrit texts into Arabic or in Persian. What were these texts? Now, this is Rashiduddin Hamdani, died in 1318, that is in 14th century. In his Jami' al-Tawarikh, he depicts a picture of Bodhisattva with these Arabic and Persian, and this book has been written in Arabic and it has been translated into Persian. This comes to us as the earliest depiction of Buddha in Islamic sources. Al-Biruni, who died in 1055, he had translated a book, Kitab Patanjali fil Khalas min al-Irtibaq, that is the book of Patanjali. It was translated into Arabic and it has been published. We have a legacy of Indian literature, Vedic literature, into Arabic and Persian, like Persianized Bhagavad Gita, Persianized Mahabharata, Persianized Ramayana. Muslim mystics in yoga, Dara Shikoh has his long legacy about yoga. His translations, like Majmu' al-Bahrain. Muhammad Ghaus Gawaleri, who happened to be a famous Sufi during the time of Akbar, he had translated the Amrit Kund into Arabic and Persian. This is one page of his manuscript. This is another page of his manuscript depicting some asanas of yoga. This is another one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one, the seventh one. Ibn Arabi, in his microcosm and macrocosm, he too has incorporated, or what could be said is that the system that we find in regard to Ibn Arabi, it has so many things to do or deal with in terms of the microcosm and macrocosm of Indian philosophy. In Sufi sadhana, as a master or the seer basically purifies or acts as the spiritual guide to the disciple. The disciple first is like this in front of his teacher. The lataif or the chakra system has been formed into, in Islamic quarters, in the Sufi quarters as lataif, with the 5 lataif, that is the nafs, qalb, ruh, sir, khafi, akhfa. They have been recognized, identified in the human body, just as we find in Yoga Sutras, in different books of yoga. These lataif, most significantly, this manuscript is with us in Aligarh Muslim University. It is in Persian, and although it has been translated into Urdu, but the basic work is in Persian. In this manuscript, we do find an epigram of lataif or chakra or kundalini yoga. One of the differences, as it could be seen easily, is that here he describes basically the 5 lataif subdivided into the 9 lataif or 5 chakras into 9 chakras, reflecting upon the macrocosm and macrocosm within the human body. Thank you very much. Just 1 minute. What the basic difference is that he has actually deleted, or because of the hindrances in terms of Muslim theology, where the presiding deities like Rakini, Dakini, Shakini, etc., these names cannot be reconciled with the monotheistic Islamic theology. They have put in or given some other names which are compatible to Islamic thought. This is another picture of the diagram. This is another aspect which might need some further investigations, because here I have found that in Mahamati Prananath Collegium Swarup, there is a reference to Noor Sagar. And the ethos of Prananath mission are well known to us. This actually brings to us a glaring chapter of a dialogue between monotheistic Islam and Vedic vision, while incorporating so many aspects of Indian wisdom into Islamic theology via Sufis. This happens to us an eye-opener in view of the past or present rigidities, conflicts, hostilities, which have seen lots of bloodshed in history. So, in view of these examples or paradigms, our faith to humanity, to dialogue between different cultures is fortified. Thank you very much.
It's an important reminder to us that the great languages of the world, like Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, also Chinese and other languages, these were the languages which became global in their areas for the transmission of knowledge. And wise people wrote in these languages from various backgrounds and various degrees and breadth of knowledge. And all of that knowledge is exceedingly important for us to delve into and learn from. And we have to be very careful of modern fundamentalists who seek to appropriate those languages for extreme views, but in the name of orthodoxy, when that orthodoxy in fact is not the ancient understanding that is embodied in these texts in the various languages. So thank you very much.
Qadiri Sampradaya of Sufi had written certain texts on Kundalini awareness, but they are not written in either Urdu or Persian, but they are written in Marathi language. And this is 16th century and 17th century Maharashtra, the border of Maharashtra, Karnataka and Andhra. And all these writings which are available, and they contribute to awakening of Kundalini Yoga, and they are practitioners of Qadri Sufi Sampradaya, influenced by Varkari Sampradaya of Maharashtra. This is for your information.
That's another glaring example of this interaction in past.
The many instances that you have shown of the Indic influence on the Islamic faith and practices, to what extent is this information integrated into the Islamic education centers, or what you call madrasas, in India and elsewhere?
Well, as regards usually the Muslim institutions all over the world, which are known as the religious seminaries, they are classified into two types. One could be termed as the canonical seminaries, and another could be termed as the canonical plus spiritualistic seminaries or Sufi seminaries. They happen to be the seminaries or the educational institutions entangled with that facet, that is, they double up as a religious seminary and Sufi centers. They are more concerned with yoga positively, and their syllabi has incorporated lots of things from yoga. Don't call it yoga because this term might not be familiar to them, but as regards the spirit, say tazkiyah, say ihsan, because ihsan or tazkiyah are the same thing in regard to purification of soul, body and soul, as do defined in yoga. So this happens to be part of their seminary if they double up as Sufi centers. Now, the second segment of the religious seminary, they simply focus on canonical Islam or Sharia Islam. You might term it as a political Islam or purely academic Islam. And they are averse to anything, even in terms of words or borrowing terminologies. They are averse to anything that are not Persianized or don't come from the Arabic sources. Right. So the first quarter is more open to this sort of a dialogue. But again, the most significant thing is that the Sufi silsilas or the orders, chiefly the Chishti, the Qadri, the Soharwardi, the Naqshbandi, these are the four silsilas which are predominantly important in the Indian subcontinent. They have absorbed so many things of this Yoga Siddha, call it Yoga Siddha or Yoga Vision. Even the terms have been taken. Like in my paper, we'll be finding so many other things, like they have developed some sorts of meditation using the Indian techniques and named them after the Indian techniques. Like Muraqaba Shughul Lahad, for example, that is Shavasana. The description is basically that of Shavasana. In canonical Islam, you won't find anything known as Shavasana, or the introverted prayer that is known as Salat-e Ma'kus. The Salat-e Ma'kus is a sort of Sirasana. And Paase Anfas, and especially Paase Anfas coupled with the Habsedam, that is Habsedam. Habsedam is not simply breath regulation. In the second stage, it is breath suspension, that is Pratyahara. So Pratyahara and Paase Anfas, all these things, they could not be found in the juristic literature of Islam. So they have taken terminologies from the yogic quarters, and if you just look into these sources, like Muhammad Ghaus Gawaliri, in his book that is printed and the manuscript is over there, and this is just one example. We have generations of Sufis who have incorporated and who have given us. So this is one glaring aspect of this dialogue.
And the first question, the relevance of theism in the discussion and the practice of yoga?
Well, the Sufi orders, everywhere Sufi orders are found, like Chishti order, Qadriya order, and Shazaliya order in
No,
our-
I
in
asked
our-
this
they have-
question. I asked this question in direct reference to the what you mentioned at the outset of your presentation. That is, this contrast that you made between the Abrahamic religions as monotheistic, contrasting it with polytheism, the way you put it. So, the very discussion of theism, whether it's polytheistic or monotheistic, what is really the relevance of theism itself in the practice of yoga and meditation, whether it's in the Sufi form or in the Hindu form?
The canonical theology of Islam is not comfortable with any practice that incorporates anything from polytheistic quarters. Maybe yoga or may not be yoga.
Is it
But
because it's
again-
polytheistic
but again,
or?
let me make it very
Yes,
clear.
right.
Let me make it very clear. In terms of, when we say, here again we will be finding two basic facets
Yes.
or schools. One is the monotheistic school of, say, for example, Ibn Arabi. And another school by others that might be described as the pantheistic school. So the pantheistic school, that is purely philosophical and spiritualistic or Sufi school, it would be very much comfortable with these yogic practices and might be borrowing. But the purely canonical monotheistic school would be averse to such borrowing.
Because of its
And
exclusivist
the
nature.
practical
I
aspect, again,
think
this practical aspect is prevalent with the second school and not the first school.
So the last and the most significant of our discussion as Ishvara Pranidhana is a total submission. The practice of these virtues are essential in the path of yoga as it helps the seeker to unfold the meaning of life and to the scale to perfection. In the first instance, we are engaged within the Ishvara Pranidhana to restructure all our thoughts, words and actions to be in harmony with the divine nature. We must have a positive and heartening thoughts and also speak kind and supportive words and to dedicate the actions. These are all steps like as a module to be used. Certainly these work to create a vision and purpose in our lives. There are also two interpretations to it. One of them say that initially we kindle our thoughts, our mind to generate ideas and images that reflect the divine will and the nature. Then we begin to express our intentions through caring speech, and finally we motivate our thoughts in order to express the divine will. In this way we begin to live in the awareness of the Supreme and in the image of divine with a chosen deity or a guru. The altar could be anything. In the second interpretation of Ishvara Pranidhana, we discover the concept of seva or a selfless service to the divine will. This involves a submission of all our thoughts and actions to the will of the divine in totality. Surrender cannot be partial or in parts because it indicates that we must act in the world without indulging in raga or dvesha, attachment or hatred. Instead, we should lead our lives as an expression of a divine using we as instruments in the hands of the supreme power. Such action helps us to dissolve the ego, revealing the divine presence pervading all around us. There could be a lot of impediments over this, absolutely without any doubt on it. According to Patanjali, the kleshas or the tensions or the stretchful situations, which he calls it as kleshas, are avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha and abhinivesha. These are stresses which are analyzed systematically in the Yoga Sutra. All the worldly problems can be traced to these 5 causes. So the situation is perceived as problematic, challenging, because of many things which are operating simultaneously in our lives. The only way out is constantly remind the mind about its ephemeral nature. One needs to counsel the mind this way, lest it gets scattered in the vastitudes of world of objects and experiences. And therefore, a yogi counseling of this kind is therapeutic method to bring peace within and without. The idea of God in Gita. The marvel of Gita in its truly a beautiful revelation of life's wisdom, which enables philosophy to blossom into a religion. Lord Krishna points out 3 conditions that are absolutely essential in order that the devotion unto the Lord may yield its promised dividend. There is a feeling of the path of devotion, because the God in Gita, you use it as both nirguna and saguna form, both we are able to see it. All the yogas are used. The idea of surrender is also given by Krishna. So the first condition he says is to fix the thoughts onto him. Usually, every human thought takes the form of an object, gathers the fragrance of it, and even puts it into the radiance of the qualities in the objects of contemplation. The second condition is necessary for a devotee to accomplish its evolution through the path of devotion. It implies that he must have a self-control while worshipping the Lord. And the last condition, he says, that one must have supreme faith. Shraddha is very, very important. Faith in oneself and the Lord alone can assure him the path towards liberation. So these are the three conditions laid by Krishna, and gives it to Arjuna to say that if you follow this, the problem of surrender should not be a problematic one. What stops us then on making this most simple, almost appearing simple at least, and formidable step towards him in our mind? Hence, he says, Manmanabha matbhakto matyaji mam namaskuru. Give your mind, Arjuna says, Lord. Arjuna, like Arjuna, all of us wonder, rather perplexed. Is it so easy to give away our thoughts, our mind, our psyche to someone? The very idea of giving up the mind is taking control over it in totality. One who has control over the mind is tranquil, both in heat and cold, and pleasure and pain, and in honor and dishonor, mana, avamana, all that way. And even in steadfast with the Supreme Self, in the very act collectively, to take all the thoughts towards that altar is what Krishna calls it as Ishvara Pranidhana. Swami Chinmayananda emphatically in his Holy Gita says that thought is it's a content of our subtle body. Both the mind and the intellect are nothing but thoughts. It's not sufficient if they leisurely wander around the concept of Lord, but they have to actually delve, penetrate, merge, and ultimately dissolve themselves into and become the very ideal perfection which the Lord represents. Every thought in every act shall carry this as its substratum, thereby mind at all times is filled with divinity. How do we understand mind? Men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own mind, says Roosevelt. Every thinker, philosopher, or a scientist finds this mind as an enigma. Our Upanishad also says, Manayeva Manushyanam Karanam Bandhamokshayoho. The mind is a very instrument cause for both bondage and liberation. Krishna acknowledges this restlessness nature of the mind, and therefore one is unable to bring it under control as it fleets like the wind. He says, Balavid Chanchalam Himana Krishna, in that verse he talks about it. So dealing with the mind which is turbulent, strong, unyielding is undeniably a tough proposition. So Arjuna's doubt is a doubt that springs in everyone's mind at all times. The philosophical analysis that I bring about in these two is, man is made by his beliefs. Yad bhavam tad bhavati. So calmness, gentleness, silence, self-restraint, purity, these are all the disciplines that is reflected in Gita. Yoga does not speak of attaining oneness of the God as such as, instead it considers Ishvara Pranidhana as a method to cross over the antarayas and disturbances. It highlights understanding the inner self, the absence of obstacles. Therefore, by Ishvara Japa, one could develop that kind of ekagrata. Just as a buttermilk which is churned to get the butter, so also is the chitta gets the prasada or the clarity. Let us conclude. Vyasa gives another explanation to that of Ishvara as a Purusha or a pure, calm, free, and so also as an individual self. The thoughts that, sorry, I'll try to conclude it. When we do not anchor the thoughts on the altar, the individual shall get carried away with the ownership of all the actions, but not the results. Many a time man mistakes that he is the master of all the decision making, not realizing that he is only an agent or an instrument in the hands of the divine. So when we are conceived, we are just an instrument. The idea of surrender flows more easily. One of the methods to control such a mind is to take it as an anchor on something which is far superior, big, and real. Taking refuge at the feet of Lord, therefore, is encouraged by both the texts. My concluding thoughts. The meeting point in both the texts is the idea of holding on to something as a scaffolding is necessary for throbbing souls wandering in the myriad worldly experiences rooted in impermanence and momentariness. The reading of all books is like a conversation with the finest mind of the past centuries. So, truly the Yoga Sutra and Gita are not ordinary texts to browse or leave it aside. It is meant for mulling over for lifetime. Trying to comprehend the minds of the heroes of the text is just a Himalayan task. Even in this century, we attempt to do the same as it is very exciting and intriguing. Thank you so much for your listening.
So, do you see as you mentioned in the Yoga Sutras, this sutra, Ishvara Pranidhana Dva, seems to come as an alternative to Abhyasa and Yoga, Abhyasa and Vairagya, for getting rid of the kleshas and so forth. Whereas in the Bhagavad Gita, it seems to be a much higher practice. Do you have more comment on that?
I presume that in yoga is used as one of in the niyama, as Ishvara Pranidhana. What is it altar, how it is to be attained, all those things are left to the seeker. So the practice towards that, the methodology, the technique, can be as per one's will, as per one's capacity to do it. Of course, using definitely the self-discipline and the detachment and the entire virtues explained in yoga. But in Gita is very, very profound, and very clearly Lord Krishna helps Arjuna in passing through this entire thing, keeping that altar as very much high, big, much bigger than reality, as because the divinity himself standing before it for that dialogue. And therefore the devotion comes very spontaneous, natural, direct, and therefore this experiential understanding in Gita becomes more easily seen by the seeker. And therefore definitely Krishna also talks about Abhyasa and Vairagya, because that's the only way he says the mind can be controlled.
Now, as an example of devotion, the Bhagavad Gita is a little puzzling, because at the very beginning, Lord Krishna is commanding Arjuna to stand up and fight, and many times throughout the Bhagavad Gita he says, get up and fight, and Arjuna doesn't obey him. But at the very end, finally, Lord Krishna says, exactly, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. And only then, when Lord Krishna stops commanding him, does Arjuna say, Tava vachanam aham karishyē tava vachanam.
Unless we take the responsibility of
I'll do what you say.
do it, only then. Otherwise, I think it's easy to follow somebody's instruction, unless the instructions comes with the idea of my freedom of choice that I exhibit, along with it, the responsibility of also accountability towards that. I think this message, when Arjuna got it, he says, okay, karishyē tava vachanam, I shall do it. That's also an aspect of a surrender. In totality, he was able to get convinced by what Krishna spoke to him.
Gurubhyo Namaha. First, my salutations to my dance and yoga gurus who have led me to this opportunity, and my sincere thanks to Dr. Vinayji, Dr. Radhakrishnan and Dr. Mrs. Joshi for inviting me to be a part of such an august audience of yoga gurus, yoga practitioners, scientists and great scholars. I come to this piece as a practitioner I don't know, expert is an odd word to use when you're talking about yourself. So, I will say a practitioner of Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi dance styles for a long time, and I have been teaching that. And I also had the opportunity to learn yoga under different gurus in India and also under the SVyasa Dr. Nagendraji's Yoga Institute in Singapore. And my thoughts and I won't be reading my paper, you all can read it when you get it. I have already sent it by email. So my presentation will be more about talking about different conferences and okay, symbols of confluence. Of course, we know and many of you may know, but for those who don't, Shiva is considered the god for most Indian dance styles, classical dance styles, and he is also known as a yogi. So, as a Mahayogi, he balances Srishti and Samhara, and some common points are like, of course, the story that as a Adi Yogi, Shiva is said to have taught one of the mythical stories is he has taught his wife Parvati and also taught the Sapta Rishis. And also in the Natya Shastra, you have the mythical origin of dance, where Shiva does not just dance and it spreads to the world, but actually he teaches Bharata the sage, and Bharata the sage passes this knowledge on to others. So, it's dance is thought of as an educative process rather than just a movement practice. And of course, the home of the Lord of Dance, Shiva, is Chidambaram. Chidambaram, of course, is Chid Akasha. So, the dance of Nataraja happens in this Chit Akasha, the internal space or the Chidambaram. So, here we see Shiva, who was a Mahayogi or the Adi Yogi, also as Nataraja or the dancer. And in this dance, I'm not familiar with all of you must be aware of this, but I'll just repeat it because it's part of my paper. So, of course, as Nataraja, he is dancing on the Apasmara Purusha, who is the demon of ignorance. So, this is not just a dance which is a movement, but it is also the dance of destruction of ignorance, and hence this is a dance of knowledge. So, the idea of dance being knowledge and being given to the world, not just to dance and to enjoy oneself, but to be part of this distribution or the understanding of deeper knowledge, has always been there in the practice of Indian classical dance traditionally. So, that is where I see the points of confluence. And of course, he holds the Damru in one hand and the fire in another, and the Damru is the act of creation and the fire is the act of destruction. So, this balance of creation and destruction within the larger cycle. And of course, we have a hasta, abhaya hasta, which is the gesture of blessing to all those who come to his feet, which is lifted upwards. So, this is called the dance of Tandava, but it is not Tandava as is popular in many Bollywood movies, where Tandava usually means an angry dance. But this Tandava is the dance of Ananda, or it is not a Samhara Tandava, not the Tandava of destruction of the Sapta Tandavas. And this is a god who is worshipped by Indian dancers as somebody who imparts knowledge and creates this yogic cycle or this cycle of creation and destruction while dancing. And of course, besides these, the dance of Shiva, on the gopuras or the temple towers in different parts of South India, we find Shiva also does, and as you know, 108 is a very auspicious number in the Indian philosophical texts. The details of that are in the paper, but I am not going to go into 100 and why 108 is important. But there are 108 karnas performed by Shiva, which actually now are being revived by Indian dancers, and it is part of the oral tradition where Shiva performs these karnas which almost look like yogic postures. So, here we have Shiva performing the different karnas, and this actually is a shot of how even in Southeast Asia, in a 9th century Prambanan temple, which is one of the few Hindu temples in Indonesia and Yogyakarta, on the walls of the temple there is Shiva as a yogi, and also one of these sculptures is of the Prambanan temple where Shiva's karnas are depicted. So, this idea of dance, yoga, Shiva and the performance of these karnas has not only been in southern India in the classical Indian dance period, but has also been part of the Southeast Asian influences, and these karnas actually you will find in Southeast Asian dance movements also. So, also Natya is called the Panchama Veda in the Sanskrit manual called, and actually there is a verse which says Nata Jnanam, Nata Chintam, Nasa Vidya, Nata Dhana, Natau Yogor Natyar Punyam Adrishyate. So, I won't fight with anybody who disagrees with it, but this is what the Natya Shastra says. So hopefully I've got little bit of everything. So that's why I was getting carried away by all the lectures, because everybody had something interesting to say, and as a practitioner of Natya, I find the whole world a very interesting play. So following this, I come to the part of Indian dance which has some commonality with the practice of asanas or the Vigraha Murtis that we see. For example, those are hastas, or they are called hastas in dance, but they are called mudras in, mudra in yoga practice. And of course, if I can, maybe you all have been sitting for so long, so maybe we can all just do a few. These are called hasta yoga, it's called nowadays. So let's all try a few hasta yoga so that we can all wake up after lunch a bit. And I was the last one. So pataka, tripataka, ardha pataka, kartari mukha, mayura, ardha chandra, arala, shukatunda, mushti, shikhara, kapitha, katakamukha, Suchi, Chandrakala, Padmakosha, Sarpashirsha, Mrugashirsha, Simhamukha, Kangula, Alapadma, Chatura, Brahmara, Hamsasya, Hamsapaksha, Sandamsha, Mukula, Tamarachuda, Trishula. So these are the different, so in a way if you do this daily, it's also a form of yoga. But of course those are some, I have mentioned some of the astas. So again, coming back to yoga as a knowledge rather than an exercise, same is true for Indian dance. Yoga as aims to universal happiness or salvation or awareness. Indian classical dance has similar goals. Yoga comes from oral tradition backed by philosophical texts and all, that's true for dance. And yoga works as much on the internal psyche as the external, and the same is true for dance. Oh God, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm the last one, so please give me time. So the angas, upangas, pratyangas, similarly in Indian dance also we have shlokas for the angas, upangas and pratyangas, and these are some of the hastas. And what I have done is actually looked at some of the texts which talk about the different, the thumb representing fire, index finger representing air, and these, and compared it to some of the hastas that I have used in Indian dance. For example, since I am running out of time, I will come to the mushti hasta, which is the fist. And as you can see in Indian dance, it is not fist with the thumb in, but it is a fist with the thumb out. So the thumb is actually holding on to the, and it is true even in fighting, you do not box with your thumb in because you will get your thumb broken if you hit somebody with that. So it makes sense, it is logical, but also all the five senses are in control, and that is how it is used in Indian dance also. In the shloka for the Viniyogas, you say sthire, means to be stable. So that is why sometimes even naturally when you are angry and you have these actors showing, trying to control the anger. So the normal faculties which are represented by these five elements are put together, and for example Trishula, which is a symbol of Lord Shiva even in Indian dance, the three gunas are supported by this if you compare it with the five elements. So the fire and water, two opposite factors, negate each other, and the other three gunas are held in control. So Shiva is in control of those three gunas which are held upright, and with this he destroys or controls the world. So it makes sense, I am trying to link the hastas with the elements, and through dynamics of the hastas, whether they are bent or in control, trying to link that this thing, and I am working on that research right now. And of course, we have breathing, which is not an integral part of Indian dance training, but it is an integral part of yoga, but that is something we need to work on to bring it together. But and also in Indian dance you have yato hasta tato drishti, which is a very popular this thing, that you follow the hands with the abhinaya to get the expression, but that is not true of yoga. But in what I come to is the essence, final this thing of me being a practitioner and how I can combine these two streams of thought together with my students. And I practice something called Rasa Yoga, in which we are taught as dancers through a technique called Abhinaya, whether it is Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi or Kathak, to control our face with certain technique and movement. And with that I practice yoga not from the neck down, but with the face also. So, for example, let us all try an exercise and then I will end my presentation. So, for Shringara, we will breathe in. Shringara means love. So, let us all try a facial exercise. So, breathe in, breathe out, smile, and then let us imagine a mirror in the hand. Can we imagine this as a mirror? And you look at the mirror and you see yourself or somebody you love, and you smile, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and then you let. So, this idea of moving the face and integrating your emotions with your facial expressions with breathing is what I am working on in Rasa Yoga, and it is this thing. So, that is my short presentation. Thank you for your patience.
I am not a dancer, but congratulations. You did extremely well presented.
Thank you.
What I liked is that how you have given the similarities, the differences between yoga and dance, and also the possibilities to work together.
Yeah.
Like, how you can bring more yoga into dance and how dance can contribute to yoga to make it more interesting,
Yes.
entertaining, and also for young people more attractive. Because young people, by the time they understand real benefits of yoga, if they can dance, it is good.
Thank you. That was great. Remind me about 30 years ago when I started about not knowing, but I stopped.
Oh, why?
That's too much concrete.
Too much.
I was too busy. But I was questioned, in the Yoga Sutras, it's like the asanas. They're like pleasant settledness, right? Is that the sutra? Pleasant settledness. Yeah, pleasant continued settledness. It's like the yoga postures are to actually create sort of an external, if you want, or physiological transcendence. You settle into the samadhi as a pose. Is there any of that in your dance where they're moving, but is there any attention on the gap between their moving, between their shifting? Or is it just they're thinking about the next thing as opposed to being, in a sense, unbounded between the movements? Even if the movements are fast, is there some attention or appreciation of the transition between one movement to the next, which is that total field of all possibilities?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but from whatever I understand, okay, the way it's a traditional in, nowadays as Indian dancers practice, like everything else in the world, the tendency is to move fast, and the audience claps only if you move fast. So if you move slowly, I'm sorry, but you won't get an audience and you won't get any programs after that. So if you dance like, people dance in the olden days, slowly and leisurely, you won't get a chance. So unfortunately, practitioners are forced to move faster Whereas if you see the older movements and practices, then there would be a tendency to, suppose I took a hasta like Tripataka and in a pure abstract movement, I just did this. Then my guru would tell me to lean and to go and stop, and the process of going from here to there is as important as getting there. So if that's what you're asking, yes. So that whether movement is silent. For example, I go like this, but my coming back is silent. This hand came back without, it was silent, like 1, 2, this hand came back silently. So the silences between the movements are also thought and lingered upon. But of course, the greatest importance in Indian dance is given to the expressive ability. Suppose, and that is where they say it leads to the Madhura Bhakti or the devotion or surrender to the universal. So that is Abhinaya portion. That's why my this thing is not of comparing just the postures in Indian dance, which is easy to do. I stand in Ekapada and say, oh, this is same as the Parvatasana. And I could do that for endlessly, and I could probably compare that to cricket or baseball and say it's the same also. But my idea is to bring in the rasa theory, because this is where the act of surrendering to the greater comes in Indian dance. When you do the abhinaya, when you express with the face and you integrate it into dance. So that's it.
Thank you. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Given what we heard this morning from Professor Travis about the interesting connection between music and coherence, I would be interested to see what kind of research, what research reveals about the integration that takes place when one dances and has music and has these thoughts in specific directions. Thank you very much, Dr. Shankar. Dr. Rama. Sorry.